Hello guys, it's Stefano here. Today I'm going to introduce you to the basics of After Effects for creating animations. So now I'm using the Adobe After Effects CS6, so the version 6 of the software. For today, it doesn't really matter, but for the future workshops, make sure that you're using After Effects 6 for more complex animations as we will be seeing in the next couple of workshops. So let's first have a look at the interface of the software. To the left we have the project window in which we will be seeing our compositions. We can import here photos or audio files and so on. This main window here is where we will be seeing the preview of our composition. Here, bottom left, we have a window for the different layers we want to animate, and just next to it is the timeline. We're going to see it more in detail in a second. And then to the right we have a bunch of tools. At the top, some info about colors and audio. Here we have an important tab for the preview of the animation. We are going through it in a second. And then we have a bunch of tools for creating some effects for our animation. And then we can also add some more tools here at the bottom if we like. We have here some tabs. If you don't see some of these windows, you can go here to the top, click on Windows, scroll down, and you can check the windows that you're missing. So you should have something like that on your screen now. Alright, let's create our first animation, which is going to be a square that moves and does some nice things. So the first thing is to actually create a new composition. New composition. And then here we can first set a name for our animation, for composition animation 1. Then we can set the type of animation we want this composition to be. We have some standards here, some preset. I will recommend for now and also for most of our projects to use this preset here, HD TV 720 30 frames per second. So basically this is one of the most common standards for videos on YouTube and so on. So 720 is the height of our video, so the dimensions are 1280 by 720 pixels. And then this number 29.97 means that we have 30 frames per second. So every second we have 30 frames in our animation. So let's set it up, and then we can leave these options here as they are. Resolution, we are going to see differences in resolution in a second. Now we can have full resolution for our review. And then duration of our animation. The first number to the right is the number of frames, so from 0 to 30 in this case. Then we have seconds. Let's say we want to make a 5-second animation. Then minutes here, and finally the hours. Lastly, we can set the color of the background. So we can click on the color, and here we can set whatever color we want. Let's leave it black for now, and then click OK. So here we have our preview of the animation, black background. To the left, the on the project area, our animation 1 composition that we can see here on this tab, where we will be placing our layers, and this is the timeline. So if I grab and hold this cursor, this marker, I can go from 0 to 5 seconds. Now nothing happens because I don't have any object to animate yet, but I want to see that we can zoom in here at the bottom. We can zoom in to the level of each individual frame, and that's very important. So we go from frame 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the same. It's exactly the same when I zoom out. I move discretely through all my frames. So that's very important. So After Effects, like any video software, animation works by frames. So I can set different things, each frame moving discretely. So let's create our first animation. Let's say we want to animate a square, an object which is a square. First thing would be to create this object. So I will go here, under layer, new solid. I want to create a new solid. The name of the solid is related to the color of my solid. I can click on the color, change it. Let's say I want nice bluish color here. I can set the size on my square. Let's say I want 250 by 250 pixels, and then I click OK here, and I have my square. So I see my square on the project area inside this solids folder that the software has created for me. But most importantly, I see this solid here. This is a layer. Works similar to, I don't know, layers in Illustrator or Photoshop. I can toggle the I button, so hide video, show videos, and then we can see how we can play around this layer. So now if I move my timeline, nothing happens because I need to animate this object. So what I want to do is to move this square here, let's say from the top, so this could be my initial position, to the bottom on my screen. So if I click Ctrl Z, I go back like any other software. So the way in which After Effects works is by keyframes. So keyframes are key moments of my animation. So in this case, I want to move the square from this initial position to this final position, right? So my initial position would be my keyframe, initial keyframe in my timeline. My final position will be the other keyframe I want to set for this animation. So let's go back to the initial position of my object. So I want to move this object to the top, as I said. I can do uh, this through different ways. One way could be to hold, uh, left click the object, and then move. I can either freely move in space my objects, or if I hold shift, I can move my objects along straight path. So this could be one way. Another way is by expanding up the layer on my solid. So I'm clicking the arrow here. I have some options for transforming this solid, and what I'm looking at now is at the position. Then we can see how we can play around these other options, but now I want the position. So I can move the position here. Here I have X position and Y position. So I'm holding the left button, left click, then I scroll this ladder and move my object to the top. So this is my, let's say this is my initial position of my square. So I want to set a keyframe on my timeline at time 0 here, very bottom, very beginning, my timeline. So I do that by clicking this watch here, which is called stopwatch. I click on it and I create a keyframe. And I see my keyframe both here, this yellow diamond, and here in my timeline. So now, second thing to do would be to change the timeline to uh, the uh, the second key frame. I want the square to be. Let's say I want my animation to end at 1 second. So I set the time to 1 second. Then I can move my object to the final position I want it to be. So I can hold objects, click and shift. I can move down the square here to the bottom. So what you see is that After Effects automatically sets a keyframe for me, exactly the time I set before, and it creates the path. The path from, if I hold a keyframe from position 0 to position 1. So initial position, final position. Now I want to animate this movement here, and I do that in two ways. I can either go here to the tab on the right and click RAM preview, or I can press 0 on my keyboard. So let's press this arrow here, RAM preview. So what After Effects does is to load all the keyframes of this animation and then let me see the preview of the animation. So anytime, every time you change something in your animation, make sure to first run the preview, and then you can see the actual preview of your animation. So now you see that my actual animation goes from 0 to 1 seconds. But in the initial setting, my composition, I set my final animation to be 5 seconds long. So I don't want to see, what's happening from, let's say, this point here to final, the final length, because nothing is actually happening. So if I click the spacebar, I can always play my animation, or I can go back here, whatever point, I click spacebar and it plays. So I don't want to see what's happening here because nothing is actually happening. I'm just losing time. So what I can do, I can shrink down my preview here by changing the length of this time ruler here. So I can either grab the end to, let's say, here right after my final, this is my final keyframe. Let's say I can move it here. This could be the first way, or if I go back, I'm working with my timeline marker. Let's say I'm here, I click N, that stands for end in a way, and here I can set the end of my preview. So now if I click the spacebar, I see the preview of just this first second or so. Alright, so now let's do something. Let's add a couple of animations, transformations to my first animation. Now I'm animating the position here, but I can also animate the scale. So I'll make sure to go back to my initial time 0, initial position. Let's say I want to scale it up from 0 to 100% my square. So I can either move the slider or enter the numbers here. So I want my object to go from 0 to 100% scale. So I have to make sure that I'm moving my timeline marker to the actual keyframe, and I can either do it manually by grabbing the keyframe. So when I'm on top of the keyframe, I see here to the left that the diamond turns from gray to yellow, nothing yellow. So here I'm actually on the timeline. But another way could be, let's say here, is to click on key button on my keyboard. So key, that stands for keyframe, and I'm on the next keyframe on my timeline. Alright, so let's do it again. Position 0, 0 scale. I set my keyframe. I click key, or I move to my second keyframe, and then I want my square to be back to 100%. And automatically, the software automatically sets a keyframe for me. It does it for me. So from 0 to 100. And then it stays to 100 because I'm not changing anything. I'm changing from 0 to 100. So After Effects does the animation in between keyframes. So this keyframe to this keyframe, then it does nothing because I haven't set any other keyframe. So now if I click anywhere else, or if I click, let's say I have my object selected, I click anywhere else, I deselect my object, I click space, and now I see the animation of both position and scale. So now we can animate other few things too if we want to. We can go back, we can animate the rotation, set up the first keyframe, then go to the next keyframe. Let's say I want this guy to rotate 90 degrees. So now if I go back, I see this rotation here. Then I can also animate the opacity, so the transparency of my object, for example. So at 0, I want the opacity to be 0%. I set the keyframe, next keyframe, 100%. And that's my first nice animation here. Alright, so now let's create a new animation. First, let's create a new composition. So composition, new composition. Let's call it animation 2. Click OK. And let's create again a square. So layer, new, solid, and then we are fine with these 250 by 250 dimensions here. Click OK, and we have our square. Let's actually make a little bit smaller, so we can change the dimension as we saw before by changing the scale. So I can either go changing the scale by changing the scale here, or if I go back, I have my square selected. I press S for scale, and I have here my scale. So let's make it a little bit smaller, like that. All right. What I want to do now is to create an animation that simulates my square swinging around like that. So the basic idea is to have my object rotating around rotation point, anchor point. That is here. So right now, if I want to rotate my object, I can click R for rotation. I can change here the amount of the rotation. Go back. So, but now the object is rotated around its anchor point, which is exactly here the center. So I want to move this anchor point from here to here. So what I'm doing, I want my anchor point to be here, and I want my object to swing around, to rotate around this anchor point. So I can open up here in the layer section my anchor point. It's here. So I can change the position of my anchor point. Now I'm looking at the Y position, so I can just move the slider. So I'm moving my anchor point away from the center point that where it was before. So now if I rotate my square, it goes like that. That is what I'm looking at, to simulate, to animate this winging movement here. So I want my object to start from this point, then I want it to go, like, let's see, here, and then swing like that, and then eventually stop here at the center. So let's create this animation. So my first keyframe would be my initial position of the square. Let's say it's here. I cannot see it now. Alright, like that. And now I'm animating the rotation. So at 0 position on my timeline here to the far left, I set my first keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch rotation. Then I want my second keyframe. Let's say less than a second or so. I want here I want my object to be, let's say, here. Alright. Then let's move again my keyframe, sorry, my timeline here. I can rotate again my square around there, and then finally here I want rotation to be 0. So let's see this previewed animation. As I said before, I can shrink down the working area like that. I can go here to the far right and press RAM preview. Now see that it's super fast. See? So what I can do instead of resetting all my keyframes, I can simply grab these keyframes and move them in time. So I'm just holding left click, moving them. Then I want to create some time between keyframes, so I can space them a little bit in space. I can space up the last one. I can expand here the working area to embrace all my keyframe. I can press 0 to reload the preview, and that's very important. So now I made some changes in my animation. So what in order for me to have the actual preview of the animation, I need to see a green line on my timeline here. So now I have only green line where nothing happens here, let's say. So I need to reload all my frames by either pressing this button here or 0. Press 0. So now the time seems to be about right. What is not right though is the actual movement, it's the actual swinging of the square. It doesn't look natural at all, as you can see. So it goes from here, then bounces this side here, then goes back, but it's not a very smooth and fluent movement. So how can I do that? One simple way would be to play with the options of the keyframes. So I can select all my keyframes here, right click, and then here there are a bunch of options. What I'm looking at is the keyframe assistant here, and inside keyframe assistant there are different options. Now I'm looking at easy ease. In the next couple of tutorials we will go through the differences between these different options, but now let's look just at the difference, what easy ease does. So now I see that I need to reload my frames by pressing 0, and here we go. Now we have a nice smooth movement swinging of my square around this anchor point here. So that's super important to play with keyframes, temporal keyframe, how time works, because it does make the difference when we make our animations, how to make it look natural, as much natural as possible. Okay, so there was another nice piece of animation. Let's move to one more example. So let's create again a new comp, new composition here, animation 3, click OK. Let's create the same square as before, new solid, OK. So let's make it a little bit smaller, something like that. So now what I want to do is to animate the square again from this position here, then moving straight to, let's say, the right, then straight to the bottom, and then straight again to the left. So this is the path I want. So as we learned before, we can set keyframes for the position of my object. So I can click P for position. I can set this keyframe for my initial position. I can move a few frames, and then I can grab and holding shift my object, or I can change here the slider. I can move the slider here to the right, then again um, change my position on my timeline. I grab my square. I'm still holding shift, moving down, so along the straight path. Then I'm moving again my timeline. I can do that. I can scroll the slider position slider. So now that's my animation here. So we can set our timeline, press 0, and here's it's our animation. But what I want to do is to create a straight path, not this curvy path here. So I can, one way could be to, let's click, we can select this slider, we can click on each of these anchor points, and then this is basically a Bezier curve, like any other Bezier curves in Rhino or any other software you guys use for designing. So I can grab these handles here so that I can try to make it straight. Kind of tough, right? So I want this path to be actually a straight one. So I can again look at the options for my keyframes here. So I can select all my keyframes, right click, and then I'm looking now at keyframe interpolation. Keyframe interpolation. And I'm looking at spatial interpolation. So right now, my spatial interpolation, it's called settings, that is Bezier curve. That's a Bezier curve. If I want to change that, go again to keyframe interpolation, spatial interpolation. Now I want a linear interpolation. I click OK, and that's my straight path. So now if I load again my RAM preview 0, here is the preview of the animation, and my nice little square is following that path. Okay, now let's look again at let's play around a little bit with this path here. Observation. Now I'm somewhere here in between keyframes, right? Let's say I'm moving this object somewhere. What I'm doing now is to create a new keyframe because I'm at the different position in time. But if I go back and I move exactly on top of my keyframe, this one, and I can see that because the little diamond here turns yellow, or as I said, I can be anywhere. Here I click key and then move to the keyframe. So now if I hold and move, if I move my square, now I'm not creating any new keyframe. I'm just keeping the keyframe and moving in space. In this case, into the my object. So let's say I want it to be here. Then let's create a new keyframe, moving back to the initial position, more or less. Let's run the preview, see the animation. So now, as you can see, I have different speed, right, in these different sides of the on my path. So what I want to do now is to have even equal speed for each of these four sides, and again I can play with the keyframe options. I can select all of them, right click, and the option in this case will be row across time. Let's go back, Ctrl Z, right click, row across time. So remember for a second the position of my keyframes here. Now I'm clicking row across time, so some of them, well, the keyframes obviously in between the initial and the final keyframes have changed position in time, right? And also, let's go back, look at the points here in the path. Now I have points distributed in this way, right click, row across time. So now they are all equally spaced. Let's click render, see the animation. So now the speed is all the same. Let's actually have a continuous path here. Um, so the software automatically sets for me this option, which is very useful. Let's say I have, so right now, okay, since here we are in path, let's also look at another useful option for working with paths. So let's say I have kind of raised track, so I can do that by going back to the Bezier keyframe interpolation, to the Bezier type of path. Okay, now I can play around a little bit with my handles here, grab them, move them around, change the handles, oops, sorry, something like that. Alright, that's good enough. Let's make this shape actually looking like a kind of simplified car. So I can click scale, as for scale, unchecked constraint proportions button. Now I can change here the proportions, smaller, alright, something like that. So if I move my card here, so it's pretty clear that it doesn't follow the track, right? It's not aligned with the path. So there is an option for that too. If I select my solid and I go to the layer option, transform, and then at the bottom there is this option here, auto orient. Click on it, and here I can select orient along path. Okay, so now it's oriented in respect to the other direction. We can click rotate 90 degrees, and now it's following the path. So let's see, load again. So now it's following the path here perfectly. So this is very useful in our future animations. Alright, that's it for this animation, and let's look to one more example. Alright, so now instead of creating a new composition, let's look at the file. Let's look at the file you should be finding just next to this video tutorial on our website. So if we can open this up, file, open project, and this file is called spatial temporal keyframes. Let's open this file here. Here we have two main compositions that we can see here in the project area: keyframe position and keyframe time. So let's first look keyframe time, keyframe position. Let's first look at what these two compositions do, and then we can go over each of the individual animations. So this is keyframe position with these nice little squares moving along different paths, whereas keyframe time, let's see what it does keyframe time. So something we haven't talked about yet. Here you have few options for customizing the preview window. So you can zoom in or zoom out. Now I want my preview to be 100%, so fit up to 100%. But I can also change the resolution of my preview when I have complex animations, many things happening, depending also on the power of your machine. You might need to lower the resolution of your preview. So now we don't have complex composition, so we can switch to full preview. But you might also need to lower to a quarter, and we can see here that the profiles are not that neat anymore. So let's go back to full. We are going to actually have a tutorial on how to optimize your working with the software in terms of RAM memory, render styles, and so on. Because you will see that it doesn't need that much of complexity for making your machine slowing down. So working with video takes a lot of memory, and then we are gonna be showing you a couple of tricks to make sure that you'll be running quite fast while working with videos. Okay, so let's see what this animation does. Let's click on 0 first to run the preview and then see the animation. So these are all straight paths, but these objects all move at different speed on time. Um, so let's first go back to the keyframe position animation, and let's quickly look at this different path here. So I can turn off the different layers. I'm looking at the first one now, so it's a straight path animation like we have done before from keyframe 0 keyframe 1. One easy and a fast way to look at the keyframes for each of these layers is to click on the U button, the keyboard U, and it opens up all the keyframes related to the layer I have selected. So now I have these two keyframes, right? And the position is animated, of course. Simple straight. Cool. I can click U and close down the layer. I can view a second layer, click U, and I see the different position. So now it's a little bit more complex, this animation here. It follows kind of arch-like path. So let's see how we can quickly design this path. Let's delete this keyframe here. Keyframe, initial keyframe. I want to move to the second keyframe. I click key, so I make sure that I'm moving my object to the next keyframe, and I can simply drag my square holding shift to the right. So it's difficult to be perfectly aligned, and the way manually I can do that in two ways. One way is would be to work with grid. Work with the grid, so I go to view and show grid here. So now I have my grid, and then I can select snap to grid. So now if I move my square here, I'm actually snapping on the grid, right? So and I could do the same for all my squares, but I don't really like that, and most of the time we don't need to be super precise when we animate our objects. We need to be more precise when we actually create our objects to be animated, and that's most of the time for us will be done in the After Effects environment, and then we can Illustrator environment, and then we can import Illustrator files into After Effects. There are going to be several tutorials for that. So for now, we don't care. We just want to view and check the grid option. But what we can do to be precise, to select both of our objects and then align them with this option here. If you don't see the window, as I said before, you can go to Window and check the Align tab here. Alright, so let's go back to the animation path. The way to create a kind of arch-like path would be to work with handle. So I can zoom out or I can also use the my scroll in the mouse, can zoom out. Then I can grab my handle here and I can design my pad as I want. Alright, that's fine. Let's go back to 100%. Let's click 0 and there we go. We have our animation. Alright, um, let's look at the U shape. In this case, I can work again with handles. Can stretch it up a little bit, make it more extreme. Go back to 100%, click 0, and here is my path. Alright, let's look at opposites. Again, handles stretched up a little bit, and then we have roller coaster. Again, pretty similar. I'm just playing with the handles a little bit to get familiar to how handles work. Then we have 3D example, but let's look at what it does. But we will be covering 3D in the next couple of sessions. 0. Let's actually just select all just the 3D. I can check this button here, solo. So only I want to see only this animation here. So see, goes back in space, and then to the background and foreground, and then to the final position. We're going to cover 3D shortly. Okay, that's it for the keyframe position composition. Let's look at keyframe time. So these are more, let's say, special keyframe options, and this will be more temporal keyframe options. So let's look again of what they do. So they all move along straight paths at different speed. So let's start off with the first one. This is linear, this is a regular speed, and we can see that's also because the space in between the points it's even, as we saw before. We can do more, so this is a constant speed keyframe style. Let's look at easy ease and the difference between the two. So easy ease goes faster at the beginning and then it slows down. So faster and then it slows down. I can do easy E, easy in, or easy or all these options as we saw before. If I select my layer, click U, and I highlight the keyframes, I can then select them, right click, easy E. That's what it is now, easy E. We can there's also a very effective way to look at these differences in speed. One way, as we said, is by looking at the distance between the points, but it's not very easy to work with distances between the points. A more effective way could be to look at the curves by checking the graph editor. So let's first look at the linear type. So I'm selecting the keyframes, and then I check the graph editor here. I can zoom in one of the selected areas, this one, in this case we are here at the bottom, by clicking at the tilde button, which is just next to 1 on your keyboard, so at the left of 1. I click on it and I can zoom up the window I have selected. So now I have my keyframes selected for my the first path, and what I see is it's basically a linear path of the speed of the animation. So before the first keyframe, speed is 0, then at keyframe 10 it starts at this speed here, which is like a little bit more than 500 pixels per second. 500 stays 500, 500 constant speeds, and then at the last keyframe it stops and it goes back to 0. So constant speed, very simple. But let's look at the position keyframe. The easy in keyframe option. Here the speed at keyframe 0, the speed goes up to 500 something. Then there is the increasing curve till reaching this point, then it goes down. So this is where it goes faster than the previous example here. It's faster and then it slows down gradually. That's easy option. If we click on TD again, we go back to our previous window. Let's uncheck graph and let's look at easy out. See the differences. Check easy out. Here. Let's click render. Let's see what it does. So it's slow, very slow at the beginning, and then it ramps up, and then it goes to the final position. So easy out, right click, keyframe assistant, ease out. Let's look at the graph again. This is easy in, and that's easy out. It's basically symmetric. Oh, sorry. Easy in, easy out. Alright, let's look at easy ease. This it's one of the most commonly used option for temporal keyframes. Let's first look at what it does. So it goes fast, then slows down, kind of naturally and gradually. Let's see the curve again. Going up. So that's the curve for easy use. It goes up and then it goes down. Curves are very effective, and we can play with curves very easily. We can select these handles here, and we can pull them over. So now I'm selecting this handle here and then pulling over to the left, and at the same time I'm holding shift to make sure that I stay at the 0 speed at the keyframe, because otherwise if I didn't hold shift, I would move here along different speed. So I hold shift pull over to the left. I can do the same for this other handle, holding shift, move to the right. So what I'm doing now is basically making this curve more extreme, going very fast at the beginning, then slowing down at the end. So let's see the differences. First preview 0, and now you can see so very start slow, then go very fast, and then it slows down. Let's make it even more extreme to see here the curve. You can zoom in and zoom out here in the bottom to adjust the scale. Let's pull it on this side, and let's pull it on this side as well. Click 0 to load, and then see. Very slow, then there is the peak, and then it slows down. Very cool. Alright, so let's see what we have. Jump and style. So it goes super fast and then it slows down. Let's quickly look at the curve. That's kind of cool. So it goes super fast at the beginning, then it slows down. There's the peak, and then it slows down. Peak, then slows down. And you can see here the distance between these different points, these different frames. Very big at the beginning, then it gets shorter when it gets closer to the end. Alright, almost done. Heavy ease, let's see difference. Again, we are playing with curves. Let's look at the last one, which is kind of cool. Last one basically does nothing but disappearing and then reappearing again at the end. So basically turn off and then turn on at the final keyframe. Very easy to do. Select the keyframes, right click, and then there is this button called toggle hold keyframe. So let's uncheck that. Now it moves from that position to the other, like the other options. If we right click, toggle hold keyframe, here we go. Very effective. Alright, that's it with the options for both spatial and temporal keyframes. Would encourage you to play around with them and play around with curves, understand how the curves work and the differences between them, because it does make the difference, as we saw before in the option of the swinging square. By playing with curves and by playing with eases and all the other options, we can make our animations look much more very natural and smooth. Alright, that's it for this first introductory tutorial, and I'm looking forward to the next one.